At the moment, it says I've been disabled from sharing my screen, so if it's possible to move it over to me, that would be great. But thank you very much, everybody, for inviting us along to this tea talk. I listened really intently to the last two talks and found them exceptionally interesting. And I just thought it would be really good to hear from people that live in our national park, in our neck of the woods, rather than just talking about the biodiversity and the geology and the history. I mean, I'll do all that, but my colleagues, Leigh and Stuart, will definitely bring a more human aspect to this talk and how they love and live in this wonderful landscape. Let's see, right then. I'll just share my screen.
It's good, Helen, yeah?
Yep, okay. Right then. So we are going to focus this talk in the southern area of the National Park, of the Yorkshire Dales National Park. It is the most visited area of the National Park, but arguably the most dramatic landscape. And you can see Ingleborough, one of the three peaks in the distance in this wonderful, wonderful photo. So the talk will cover a little bit of history, a bit of biodiversity, geology and land management, and then these personal accounts from Leigh and Stuart. So where are we? Well, we're right smack bang in the middle of Great Britain, really, the United Kingdom, and we are situated just on the Pennine Ridge and form part of 44 protected landscapes across the whole of England. We were first designated in 1954, and we recently increased in 2016 by 25% to the current size that we have now. It's a predominantly upland landscape filled with dales, or you could call them valleys, or I think in Ireland you call them gleens. And it covers just over 2,000 square kilometres, with agriculture being the dominant industry. Nearly 24,000 people live within its boundaries. We've got an increasing age range, and the area does suffer to some degree from second homeowners and properties used for holiday accommodation. But as it's now the second most visited national park in the country and bringing in £400 million to the local economy each year, it is something to sort of take stock of. So the geology is, as Brendan has said, is very, very similar to the Burren. We share the same type of limestone, this great scar limestone laid down in layers during the Carboniferous period 350 million years ago. In places, it is over 200 metres thick, and because of that thickness, it is quarried and it's used for road limestone. With ice age and weathering, it's been exposed in many, many places, including in the northwest of the national park around Autumn, and also down in the southwest, as you can see on the map. And the typical features that you see in the Burren are like pavements, cliffs, screes, scars. We have sinkholes, dry riverbeds, spring lines, and that layered stepped hillside. Also, we have a topping of Yoredale beds, particularly in the Three Peaks area, which are the main geology of Ingleborough, Whernside and Pen-y-Ghent, which are one of our most visited areas in the national park. We also have a series of fault lines going through the national park, with the Craven Fault being synonymous with the limestone area. And this is where the Great Scar Limestone abuts against the Millstone Grit, which then moved the Carboniferous limestone up by about 30 metres in height. Other features include numerous waterfalls, which you'll definitely hear about with Stuart's talk, dry valleys like Goredale Scar on the right-hand side of this slide. And you also see the layering rocks, as you can see in this picture, in Littondale. So we've got this amazing landscape above ground, but we also have this stunning underground cave system as well. It is one of the most important parts of the national park for cavers, and we have a huge area of caving systems within this part. We have amazingly large caves and potholes, such as Gaping Gill in the top right of this slide, which at 98 metres deep is the second deepest in the country and contains the highest unbroken waterfall. We also have the Three Counties cave system, which is another record breaker, and it is arguably the longest and most complicated cave system in Britain, currently thought to be about 89 kilometres long, with over 40 different entrances. and it's possible to go underground in Yorkshire, pass under Lancashire, and emerge in Cumbria. Parts of the system have great names like Wretched Rabbit Passage and Ball Pot of the Witches. And so with all of this, we come back to the human impact. And we've got human habitation for over 12,000 years, from the Paleolithic period to the present day. Any trace of any earlier people have been lost through the action of the glaciers that scarred the Dales for thousands of years. So the finds from the Paleolithic period are hunting implements in particular. An barbed harpoon point was found in Victoria Cave, which you can see in the top left of this slide, and that was carbon dated to about 11,000 years before present. Now, moving forward in history, evidence of human occupation can be seen in the landscape from hilltop forts, settlements and field systems, and then the Romans arrived and imprinted themselves in the landscape, and you can see things like marching camps like this one on Malham Moor on the right hand side of this picture. So moving forward in time to the medieval period, we had large estates established to raise income and food for the monastic houses. Large areas of the Dales were given over to monastic granges, and the farming that developed introduced lynchets, which are terraced field systems, and intricate field patterns that are still very much evident today. And you can see in the top left of this slide the field pattern around Malham, where Leigh and Stuart live. And Dales are renowned for its barns and walled landscape, and the intricate pattern of the walls across the whole of the national park are a sight to see. The barns mostly date back to Georgian era, where there was a time of great development in transport, mainly canals and roads. And during this industrial revolution and industrial development phase, farming was predominantly cattle and sheep, with the barns used to house the cattle and to store the summer fodder over the winter period. We also had a lot of improvement to these grassland areas through the application of lime. And the lime was actually produced through these lime kilns that you can see in the right hand side, and we have a huge number of lime kilns across the national park. So with all the human interaction and all the geology, we do actually then have some amazing habitats and species. The land management here has contributed to this, so human impact has definitely shaped what we have in this part of the national park. We have many areas protected under national and international legislation. We have 25% of the national park area covered by a site of special scientific interest, which is akin to your natural heritage areas in Ireland. It also sits within European designated like special areas of conservation, like the Burren is under, and special protection areas. We also have 11,000 hectares of limestone pavement orders protecting the geological features. And we have one Ramsar site of Malham Tarn, which you can see in the left-hand side of the slide here. Malham Tarn is a glacial lake and is only one of 8 upland alkaline lakes in Europe. And at 377 metres above sea level, it is the highest marl lake in the UK and has a pH of between 8 and 8.6. It's home to 6 species of fish, as well as white-clawed crayfish, and most recently, the water vole has been reintroduced to this area. On its edge are raised bogs, fens and mires, the latter of which are very numerous throughout the limestone area of the national park. Our grasslands are probably not as rich as the Burren, but still have some amazing populations of specialist wildflowers. We also have significant areas of scrub woodland, grazed pasture, and grazed woodland as well, wood pasture. These are mostly hazel and ash woodland and are scattered throughout the area, containing amazing ground flora like bluebell, wood anemone, orchids, and specialist limestone grassland flora like wild marjoram, thyme, and wild helleborine. Moving on to the species. It is a special place, and we do have a number of special species. And because of the range of the geology and the type of soils we have on there, we have anything from moorland all the way through to limestone pavement, limestone grassland, mires, dry riverbeds and the like. All the species that you see here are synonymous with karst features and calcareous grassland. Many of them will be familiar to you in the Burren, though we do have some differences, and some are more of the individual ones include globeflower and autumn gentians that you can see in and around the limestone pavements and on our more neutral grassland. And we also have breeding waders like the curlew that you can see here, lapwing, redshank and snipe. And in the streams, we do have really good populations of white-clawed crayfish. Where the pavements of deep like specialist woodland and meadow flowers prevail, and in this particular example in the top right, we have meadow rue. The Dales also contains the southernmost range of the northern brown argus butterfly, which needs the common rock rose as a host food plant for its larvae. So moving on to the land management. And as Brendan has said, we've had a long history of agri-environment within this national park. I've personally worked in agri-environment within the national park for the last 24 years, but it's been in existence within the national park for 30 years. So a long history of involvement of farmers in looking after the land. And as Brendan has said, we've had these innovative projects that have been developed off the back of those, like the Limestone Country project, of which Leigh and Neil have been one of the founding members of that particular project a long time ago now. I've worked it out, it's nearly sort of 15 to 16 years ago now. So it's been quite a long time, that Limestone Country project, but it was really successful in encouraging farmers to move from mainly sheep grazing over to these woolly beasts, these native cattle breeds, like the blue-grey that you can see in this particular picture. And this has definitely had a really positive impact on the health of the calcareous grassland in particular, as they're not as selective grazing methods as the sheep breeds. We do have a very iconic sheep breed that is, as you can see from our emblem, that's a Swaledale tup for the Yorkshire Dales National Park, but actually the most identifiable sheep breed for this area of the southern area of the national park is the Dales bred, which you can see on the left-hand side of the picture. And those are still being looked after and maintained as a rare breed across this part of the national park. We protect a lot of iconic species, and in the main picture on this slide, you can see somebody collecting juniper seed, which was reared into plants, and these were recolonized in other parts of the national park. We have a problem with the age range of juniper, and we're trying to get a more diverse age range by encouraging the seeds to germinate in this way. And then moving forward into the future, and perhaps, you know, quite a new thing for us really, is a wilder type of landscape, and organisations like the National Trust are very keen to introduce a bit of wildness to their estates. And in this picture in the bottom right, in Wharfdale, they are planting up areas with scrub woodland and reducing sheep numbers quite considerably to make it more of a diverse habitat, and producing different public goods like sequestering more carbon and reducing flood risk. Now I'm going to hand over to Leigh to continue the talk. Thank you.
Thanks, Helen. Can everyone hear me? Is that okay? Thanks for the chance to speak tonight. I think I don't want to repeat a lot of what Helen said. She's really covered the detail of some of the topics I'm going to talk about. I'm not a regular public speaker, so please do bear with me and I'll do my best. I'm Leigh from Hilltop Farm in Malham. I'm not originally from Malham. I'm from the northeast of England, from an industrial town just outside Newcastle upon Tyne. And I'm here in Malham because I met a farmer, and that farmer is Neil Heseltine, and you can see us together in that photo there. Neil's family have farmed here for generations, and we're lucky enough to farm here now with our young daughter. My aim tonight, I think, is to provide just an overview of our limestone landscape, what it's meant for our farming, but also our community, and perhaps some of the challenges we face in the community. Next slide, please, Helen.
Oh, it's not working. Hold on, let's do it again. I wonder if it's because you're talking that it won't let me move it on.
Well, it says on the mug, in case of emergency, ask Neil. I know Neil is on the call tonight.
Helen, maybe if you try stop sharing and then maybe start sharing again, sometimes that works.
Okay, right, I'll do it again. Sorry, Leigh.
All right, don't worry.
Right, let me just get down to the particular one. There we go.
Ta-da! Yeah,
Right,
there we are.
there we go.
So this, yeah, this is me and Neil, and that's us in our hay meadow. And yeah, so this is the first slide I want to talk about really. And I think it's really important to say, and this sounds like a really obvious thing to say, that the limestone geology here just underpins the feel and the appearance of the whole landscape. And it's a landscape that I've come to know and love. It seems obvious to say it, but I really can't overstate it. It's just an apparent feature in our everyday lives. And the photo shows Primula, and she's one of our belted Galloway cows, and with Malham Cove behind. And Malham Cove is a major landscape feature formed by the last ice age about 12,000 years ago. And it's probably what everybody comes to see when they visit Malham, and it's kind of gained notoriety and fame all over the place. Living with it as a backdrop is an everyday reminder of the longevity of the landscape and how long it's been here. It's loved by climbers, walkers, artists, photographers, and everyone in between. And we're so privileged to live within the backdrop of Malham Cove. Next slide, please, Helen. So this is Neil on the quad, just bringing some of our sheep back to the hills. And these are Swaledale sheep. I think if we're talking about cultural and historic value in the landscape, Helen's touched on it already, but the dry stone walls and field barns are just a ubiquitous part of the Dales, and in Malham Dale particularly, the limestone is so apparent and awe-inspiring. The walls show a lot of earlier settlements. Some of them date back 500 years, but latterly more from the Enclosures Acts of the 17 and 1800s, when wealthy landowners enclosed land, common land, from sort of subsistence and peasant farmers, and most of our walls date to that period. There's loads of archaeology and lynchets, medieval field systems, but yeah, lots of evidence in the landscape of previous life here. And it may look conventionally beautiful now, but it's been so well documented that there's been a history of lead and calamine mining here, and some of that's actually been on our land. And the workings and the evidence of those mine workings have become habitats in their own right now, which leads me nicely on to the natural landscape. And again, I don't want to repeat loads of what Helen says, but mine's going to be much more of a whistle-stop tour, really. But the unique habitats we have in the Dales, for example, the limestone pavement, of which there's a lot, support specific botanical species, grasslands with triple SIs, and designations of local, national and international importance. We're very lucky in that respect. When I look at the landscape, I always get the feeling that the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. We're very lucky that the major landscape features like Malham Cove, but then we also have Goredale Scar, which is a limestone gorge, slightly further east. The real spectacular features, but the cultural and natural features of the landscape are just inextricably linked. It's just a complete circle of nature, farming, geology, and people. And most of what we see is as a result of previous human existence. So next slide, please, Helen. So next I'm going to talk about our farm, which is Hilltop Farm. And I was just really interested to hear what Brendan was saying there about the Burren project. And it's something that I've followed over the years. And I think there's obviously so many parallels there, and your farming for nature images there just really reminded us of our journey in the sort of limestone nature-led farming that we do now. We farm approximately 350 acres in Malham, and it's all upland disadvantaged land, or nearly all of it is. It's environmentally sensitive. We have triple SIs on the land, and we farm native belted Galloway cattle and native Wensleydale and Swaledale sheep, which are both indigenous to the Yorkshire Dales. We farmed very conventionally until about 16 years ago, a very high input system, high in terms of labour and manpower, very busy, loads and loads of hours, but also high input in terms of the amount of feed and concentrate we were buying in to feed to sheep over winter and in lambing time. We were offered the opportunity to join the scheme, and that was the Limestone Country Beef Project. And again, Helen's touched on this, but the scheme identified overgrazing in the limestone uplands as being a real issue, and identifying a lack of biodiversity. You know, if I remember back to that time, the sward was very short. There wasn't ever really a chance for anything to grow or set seed. So we followed the incentives to take sheep off the hills and replace them with native breed cattle. And that scheme was based very much on a conservation grazing model, keeping thick grass down. And these are concepts, I feel like I'm preaching to the converted, but these are concepts you'll all be very familiar with in the Burren, but keeping those thick grasses down over winter and using the native breed cattle, which can be outside and, you know, graze in a very different way to sheep. And the results of that came much quicker than we expected, actually, which was really nice to see. And here you can see some of our belted Galloway herd grazing on a really diverse habitat of calcareous and acidic grassland. And in the foreground is the bird's eye primrose, and that's a species which is really specific now in the UK to damp upland grasslands of the North Pennines. So yeah, we're very happy to play a part in the conservation of that species and loads of others, and it's a real privilege to be involved. Next slide, please, Helen. So the Limestone Country Beef Project really led us from conventional farming into a gradual system of nature-led farming. And 16 years on from that, we're now certified organic by the Soil Association. We're certified Pasture for Life, approved suppliers, and Pasture for Life represents farmers who are only feeding grass and pasture to livestock. So there's no concentrates in our system at all now. And we run a very, very low input system now, and it couldn't be more different. And it's given us, and especially Neil, more time to enjoy the farm and enjoy some of the other things that we like to do in life too. So this is our upland hay meadow, this is Butcher Meadow, and that was put into restoration 10 years ago with the help of the Yorkshire Dales Millennium Trust and also Natural England through Countryside Stewardship, HLS as it was then. And this and the rest of our land is managed by now planned holistic grazing. And that just means that the stocking densities and grazing timings are just key for the habitat that we manage. All the work we've done with nature on the farm has led barn owls and hares to make the farm their home. We've seen the return of botanical species, pollinators, and bird populations. The curlew, lapwing, snipe, redshank, skylarks, a lot of the species Helen mentioned previously. We're very lucky to see those on the farm now. I think we still have loads to do in terms of creating and managing more diverse habitats on the farm. And that's something we've got to look forward to, really. We've already created some fenced off areas that are now completely ungrazed. And it's just been exciting over the last 8 years to see the natural reoccurrence of tree species like hawthorn. And we're looking forward to the next chapter that brings. Next slide, please, Helen. So, given that both of us have talked about people in the Dales and the longevity of people in the Dales and how that shows in the landscape, I really want to talk about our present day community here in Malham, but also the visitors and tourism, because I think it's really important to include them as people in the Dales. So what's it like to live in Mallandale? Well, it's absolutely great, and we're dead lucky. We have a really active community of families who've been here forever, but also people who've chosen to make Malhamdale their home. We have a village school, we have pubs, 3 pubs, and church, and all with regular enthusiastic attendees, some more enthusiastic in the pubs. This image just shows carol singing in our pubs last Christmas. It's always a very fun, jolly, filled affair, which everyone looks forward to. And in Malhamdale, there's always lots of reasons to interact. We have loads of local events and fundraising, and people really help each other. And that's never been more apparent than this year during the COVID crisis. I always think that the landscape really brings people together. There's so much opportunity for interaction if you go out for a walk. You always meet others who are walking, running, cycling, farming, dry stone rolling, and there's always a reason to stop and have a chat. Next slide, please, Helen. So yeah, just to talk about visitors and tourism. It's not a modern thing for Malhamdale at all, and there's been a real long history of tourism over the last few decades and even centuries, and many famous artists and writers have really documented their time in Malhamdale. As a family, we really enjoy tourism and welcome it and the vibrancy it brings to the village. It supports our small business, but also other businesses in the village, and it's a real big part of the local economy here. I think it's also important to say that the visitors support our local fundraising events. They're usually very public events, and the funds raised from those events goes into our school and our churches and our village halls, and that's much needed, and we're very grateful for that, really, because we have the limestone landscape. We have people who come, and we almost have an audience for those things, really. This is our group accommodation on the lane. You can see sheep, just Neil taking some sheep past. The farmhouse and holiday cottage are behind. We think it's really right to share the landscape with other people, and we've accommodated so many people over the years, from family, large extended family groups, couples, universities, schools and colleges, scouts and guides, everybody really. And it's a real privilege to share it, especially those who aren't fortunate enough to live in beautiful green space themselves. And it's really important for people's mental and physical health. We share a lot of our journey in farming through Instagram, Twitter and Facebook, and that's something we've done for the last few years. I'm aware time's running on, so I'll keep it going. With tourism has come impact, and I hate to be negative, but I think it's important to reference that the ever-increasing numbers of people present conflict at times. Next slide, please, Helen. I think this image just shows the intensity of parking when we reach saturation point in the village. This is the only road through the village. There's no parking allowed here. And on occasions it's become unsafe. There's been access issues, and we sometimes see other behavioural issues with tourism. The usual things: litter, dog muck, people leaving footpaths, erosion, and not behaving in a respectful way. And I think this causes understandable conflict with local people who just find it difficult to understand why the village is being disrespected. I think it must be a minority of people, because I think otherwise we'd have loads of problems. But I think parking and access has become a real issue. To bring things to a close, last slide please, Helen. I love living in this landscape. It's always feels ancient. There's so much to see and understand. It's really beautiful. And the trade-off for living in a beautiful place is thinking creatively about managing the challenges we face, about engaging with people and not taking it for granted. And finally, I think its longevity often makes me feel really small. Some days you can just feel the weight of history here. And I think that's got to be enough reason to challenge ourselves, to balance all the things we need to take from the landscape, and to make sure it's protected and managed for the future and for climate change and nature recovery. Thank you.
Thanks, Leigh, that's brilliant. over to Stuart.
Good evening. You can't see me yet, but you can hear me. I'm Stuart, and like Leigh, I live in Malham. It's a small village, which, as Leigh has already pointed out, is very popular with day visitors. It's towards the southern end of the Yorkshire Dales. I've grown up and I've lived in Limestone Dales all my life. And Helen has asked me to talk about my experience of living and working here. So here we go. Up until about 10 years ago, I was the third generation of a 60-year-old family business, just a few miles down the Dale, down a little village called Gargrave. I commuted the 7 miles up and down from Gargrave every day, but I didn't really know the Dales all that well. I didn't know the wider area, and particularly further north, like Arkengarthdale, Swaledale. I knew they existed, but I knew nothing about them. My window onto nature and local area were my regular dog walks. Slide 2, please, Helen. There we go. This was our dog Oscar, who, bless him, he always used to take me to some wonderful places. And in the background there, you can actually see Gordale Scar that we talked about a bit sooner. Anyway, my dog walks in the area were my window onto nature. And I used to love, and I still do, taking a camera and a pair of binoculars on the off chance of spotting either wildlife or a beautiful bit of landscape just to capture. On my walks, just quite locally, I've been lucky enough to see roe deer, foxes, otters, kingfishers, dippers, stoat families, and a lot more. And Leigh's also pointed out about some of the flora in this area. And that is just beautiful. At the right time of year, it's spectacular. Longer walks, which both my wife and I have enjoyed over the years, tended to be taken further afield. We used to go to the Lake District or out to the coast or somewhere like that. But after a bit of a health scare and a bit of a life appraisal about 10 years ago, we closed the family business down, and through a chance conversation with a friend from the next village, a stroke of good fortune, I landed my dream job. And it's a job which I've been doing for 9 years, and it still continues to surprise and delight me. Next slide, please, Helen. So what do? From April to the end of September, I work as a baggage courier for a local walking holiday company. So a typical day will see me collecting luggage like suitcases or rucksacks from campsites, from hotels, from guest houses, from bed and breakfast places, and moving them along the long distance footpaths that crisscross our area to the next night's accommodation for the people who are walking. We've got many footpaths in the area. We've got the Pennine Way, we've got the Dales Way, and countless other ones. And with this job, I get the chance to travel all over the Dales. I get the length and breadth of it and further. And the wonderful thing is, I don't have a fixed timetable. As long as I pick the bags up anytime after 9:30 when the walkers are set off, and deliver them before 4 o'clock, and as long as I don't make too many big diversions, then the day is my own. I can do what I like. Like I said, it's a dream job. I can't believe someone pays me to do it. You know, I'm driving all over the Dales in this countryside. It's their van and it's their diesel. And in the years I've been doing it 9 years now, I have learned so much about the Dales that I never knew before. I mean, you know, I've lived here nearly 60 years and I've learned so much in the last 9 years. It's unbelievable. Next slide, please, Helen. Now, I have a passion, which has been hinted at already. Oops. And my passion is wild swimming. And the job that I do dovetails perfectly with this passion. It allows me to pursue it with a real vengeance. Most days in the summer particularly, it will see me immersing myself in a stream or a waterfall or a lake somewhere. And I take my coffee breaks and my lunch breaks. Often 2 or 3 times a day, I'm doing this. I always carry spare trunks in the van, just in case. Some places I swim are quite well known and they can be quite busy. But a lot of them are like this. They're quite remote and quite special. and they really get you the chance to soak up the atmosphere of the place. The one you're looking at here is a quiet location up near Sedbergh, and it's one that I found by chance. And I also found that running alongside this stream, there's a geology trail called the Adam Sedgwick Geology Trail. I had no idea that existed, and through my work and through my swimming, I found this geology trail, and they've got marker boards all the way down, showing all the different features of the rocks. And it's just fascinating. If you want to go online and look it up, it's the Adam Sedgwick Geology Trail. It's fascinating. Now, I try and swim a couple of times a week at least, all year round. And the feeling after a cold dip is unbeatable. For instance, last week, my mate Les messaged me to say I was popping over to Janet's Foss, which is a little waterfall quite near the village here. Did I fancy going with him? It was after dark. It was raining. It was blowing a hoolie as I walked up the road. Taking your clothes off and getting into cold water in those conditions takes a bit of commitment, and it's a real effort of will. But the swim next to the raw energy of that waterfall was delicious, and we both came out on an absolute high. I really think I can say that I've never had a swim that I regret. If we could have the next slide, please, Helen. Thank you. Through wild swimming and social media, I've met up with other like-minded souls, and we formed what we thought would be a small group on Facebook to have group dips and to swap notes on favourite places. We became the Dales Dippers. I think there's one or two of them listening in at the moment. This picture is the 5 Dales Dippers admins. Summer solstice this year as the sun rose, and that was the most magical moment. In just about 2 years, the explosion of popularity in wild swimming, aided by no public swimming pools being open this summer, has seen our membership grow to about 3,500 as it stands at the moment. A proportion of these are visitors who are watching the group for inspiration to look at places, but there's now a large number of dippers and swimmers scattered right across the Dales, getting out, enjoying the rivers and the waterfalls like I do. We use the group to help each other and to advise each other, and under more normal times, when it's not COVID, we use it to organise big group dips, but obviously that isn't happening at the moment. And it has to be said that the friendship and the camaraderie that's come across through the swimming community is it's unbelievable. I've never encountered anything quite like it. And so many people are getting so much out of it, both through fitness and just for personal well-being, for mental health and things like that. It's tremendous. In the early days of the group, we were quite open about sharing swim spots, but sadly, we've had to become a bit more circumspect with the more sensitive locations in the light of events that we've seen across various places this summer. Ease of access, a long, relatively dry summer, and the lack of alternative indoor amusements like shopping and cinema and that sort of thing, and no foreign holidays, has seen a massive rise in visitor numbers this year. And as Leigh's already sort of touched on, the ensuing impact has been felt in many ways. But from a personal point of view, the amount of lift that I've encountered this summer, and occasions in quite remote places, has been rather disturbing. I'm not sure going forward how the village and the wider Dales can cope with it. The volume of cars needing to park in the village used to be only really bad on a bank holiday weekend, but it is getting worse and worse. But as Leigh says, we need the visitors. You know, they are the lifeblood of the Dale. So it's a cleft stick sort of situation, really. Anyway, moving away from negative, I don't want to dwell on that. Number 6, please. Helen, over there. Thank you. A combination of learning more about the Dales through work and driving all over the place, studying maps, looking for waterfalls and things like that, and wanting to stay fairly local more recently, has meant the walks that my wife and I have been doing this year have been a lot more closer to home. Case in point, the picture you're looking at is the Ingleborough National Nature Reserve. We walked up there. This photo was taken last week, I think, something like that. We did a 5-mile circuit around this area, and while we were up there, we came across an information board right up on the top, and it told us that the large area of limestone that we were walking across and around was the largest and the best example in the country. You know, we've walked there several times with no idea. You know, I've lived here all my life. I didn't know this. I think things like this, when you're still finding things out about stuff like that, it's fantastic. We also, while we're up there, we spotted a bird that we'd never seen before, and we watched it for a while, and we said, what's that? And we got home and we got the bird book out, and it turns out we were watching a male hen harrier, which I didn't know we got around here. So again, you know, things like that, they're always amazing. You never stop learning fascinating new stuff about the land that you live in. So I have to be thankful that I live somewhere like this, and I also have to be so happy to share it with other people like Lisa's. You know, it's a beautiful place. I'm blethering now anyway. So that's it's a brief snapshot of me and my life in the Dales. I do hope you've enjoyed it. If you want to ask anything, please ask away. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Stuart. And just a final couple of slides before we finish. They both mentioned the impact that visitors have on this special area. And I won't dwell on this bit, but just to sort of show you the most recent figures that we have on visitor numbers into Malham. The graph on the top left of this slide just shows the steep increase after our lockdown was eased in sort of the end of May time, and the number of people that then decided that they needed to get out to the countryside was enormous, really. And obviously that has impacted on people, the residents' impression of visitors, but also the impact on the landscape itself. And both Leigh and Stuart have mentioned the littering problem, the lack of respect and things like that. And it can be just seen as negative, but we need to try and turn that round. And I'm sure you have similar situations over in Ireland where this is the case, and we need to turn it round into our favour, really, and treat it as an opportunity to talk to people, to get them involved in loving nature, loving the landscape, respecting these beautiful areas, getting them involved in litter picking and understanding why. Having a more diverse range of people coming to our national parks. We've certainly seen that this particular year with an increase in minorities coming to our national park, which is great to see. But it also needs a degree of management as well, as cultures are clashing, and people, particularly residents, I would say, probably need a little bit more understanding of what people would like to see and what they'd like to know about. And we have opportunities now within the national park to pass on that message through looking through a lens at these iconic species that we have here, like the peregrine falcon at Malham Cove, where we see thousands and thousands of people coming through this area just to look at this bird. So there is a message to say about why that bird lives here, what kind of lives off, the habitat that it needs, habitat that the prey needs. There's loads of things that we can tell people that can give them that impression that this landscape is managed and looked after, and it's something that they need to treasure for the future as well. And we're really keen to get people out onto farms so they can understand what food production is all about and how food is produced, and the many different ways that food can be produced as well. And so this is our opportunity to turn things around, to help people understand what this national park is all about, help them understand why people live here and what they enjoy about living here as well. I'll leave you with the sunset over Ingleborough and the Brillblehead Viaduct. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much, Helen. That's terrific, and thanks for taking so much trouble to organise such a multifaceted presentation, yourself and Leigh and Stuart. It's really wonderful to hear so many different perspectives and different stories, so I'm really grateful to you. We have a ton of comments and compliments coming through, and a few questions as well, and my colleague Pranjali maybe will help with the Q&A in a minute. Can I just ask you one or two questions, maybe, Helen, to begin with? Obviously there's like potential conflicts and difficulties managing tourism, but within the local community, the fact that it's such a special landscape and so heavily protected, is there also an issue, for instance, with regard to local people building houses and finding a place so that the local community can exist and thrive and grow? Is that part of the problem?
Definitely, it is one of the problems. I mean, I did touch on the ageing population that we have here. We also have a really high average house price within the national park. It's above the national average, and it's impossible for young locals to afford to live here at the moment because of that. We have had very much a recent local plan developed that highlighted many discrete areas of the national park that could be developed by building houses, and we do have a target for new house building within the national park itself. The problem that we face is because we want low-income housing here to support young families, encourage young families to stay here, and also any other young people. It doesn't actually attract the builders that we need to build these houses because they want to sell them at a high profit. And actually having low-income housing, it isn't really conducive to their business plan. So it has been quite difficult. We might have the places agreed where they can do the building work, but you know, we haven't got the interest there to actually get the building done. We have got some work ongoing at the moment in Wensleydale, where we've got a significant number of houses going in at Westen, and that's brilliant, but it is few and far between, that kind of situation. We've also been more relaxed about how the field barns are used, particularly the ones that are near the roadside, allowing farmers to convert them into accommodation, either housing for themselves or for their families to move into, or to sell on with planning permission to develop themselves. So there are ways that we're trying to get around this, but it is a problem still, definitely.
It's a problem, yeah. It's a very interesting approach. I think a lot to learn there. And just another quick question. It's interesting to see that the seasonality of the tourism curve is very intense for parts of the year. And then to hear you mention in a different part of your presentation about rewilding certain parts of the Dales. So it's one extreme to the other in a sense. How has that project been working? How do local people view it? You know, particularly the farming community. How do they feel about the notion of rewilding parts of the landscape?
I think they're nervous. I'm sure Leigh might join us on this reply, but I think farming community are nervous because there's been quite a lot of different press about rewilding, and some not always very positive towards what farmers are achieving, particularly like in the Lake District, for example, and here in the Yorkshire Dales as well. But there's different ways of skinning a cat, really, of introducing rewilding to farmers, and it's not just about removing livestock completely from the system. From our perspective, we've got so many really important habitats that need grazing animals that is what we're after as an authority. We want places that have slightly less stock to places that need a lot of livestock just to maintain the landscape as it is, and so that you can see the historic environment. So it's a real juggling act, and the farming community are still quite sceptical about rewilding for sure, but they are interested in moving forward in terms of what we're now calling public goods delivery in this country, and that's to do with things that can't get paid for through the market. So that's clean air, biodiversity, clean water, carbon sequestration, all that kind of thing. So they're getting their heads around all of these different terms, as well as that impact of rewilding. And it's something that they need to that they are having to consider, because their farm incomes are pretty dire, really. And it's one way of perhaps bringing in funding in the future. But I say we've still got a long way to go in terms of convincing some of them. But I would say we've got a lot of very similar farmers to you, high nature value farming that goes on. And Leigh and Neil are one of the, the stalwarts in this.
And I was going to come to Leigh with a quick question before I hand over to Pranjali. Leigh,
Okay.
as a farmer yourself, and Neil, on such a beautiful farm, which looks amazing, the stone buildings and the beautiful belties and the swale dales as well. Differently to Ireland, within the national park you can have active farms. Here in Ireland, our model is maybe have a protected zone without people living in it. It's quite different, I think, the model that you have in the UK. To what degree do you feel you have freedom to farm your land, or to what degree do you feel you're restricted and limited in terms of how you manage your livestock?
I'm not sure we feel particularly limited, because I think we've been doing this for such a long time now. You know, we're 16 years on from the Limestone Country Beef Project, and I just think it's sort of second nature to us now, if you pardon the pun. I don't think we really feel like we would want loads more stock, and if anything, everything we've done over the last 16 years, particularly with sheep in mind, has been about destocking. And that's not because we don't particularly like sheep. It's just that the farm model we had wasn't profitable, and that's a really important thing, that being profitable makes sure that you're still there in years to come. And so I suppose in some way we've moved with the system, though it's helped us massively. Becoming a nature-led farm has helped us massively, because it forced us into a situation where we took stock off the farm, we sold a lot of sheep. I mean, we went from 800 breeding sheep gradually down to 150. And everybody thought, you know, I think we thought, you know, sheep make us lots of money, and Neil's done lots and lots of work and presentations on this over the years. And it looked like a big profit game for us with sheep, but it wasn't, because the amount of inputs we put into them, we worked out that Neil was working for about 15 pence an hour. So actually, if anything, destocking has been a valuable thing for us. And actually now, both of our enterprises from livestock, sheep and cattle, are both profitable. And not profitable to the sense that we could make a normal living wage that other people could expect through employment through them, but they're both profitable. And then I suppose the rest of our income is made up through countryside stewardship and all the nature-led work we do. I hope that goes some way to answer your question, but I think we both feel that the nature value, the high nature value stuff for us has been a brilliant, enlightening experience, and it's something that we really enjoy doing, and it just brought a lot to our life, really.
Brilliant, that's a great answer, Leigh. Can I maybe ask Pranjali? I know there's loads of chats and questions, so maybe a few questions via yourself, Pranjali.
Thanks, Brendan. Thank you very much for your presentations. Just a reminder to our attendees, if we still have a few minutes, so if you have any questions for any of three of our speakers, please send them in to us in the Q&A button, and we'll try and ask them. I just see a few there, Leigh. Is there a time period in which you would welcome more visitors as anonymous attendee?
I mean, like I said, I'm very pro visitors. I think it makes the village very vibrant in lots of ways, and I think if you go to villages that don't have as many visitors as us, it actually can have a negative impact on local populations. So I have to stress I'm pro it. I think at the moment I feel that we possibly are at saturation point, and it's more about what the landscape can handle. And I do worry about damage and erosion to the landscape. I do worry about dry stone walls, a lot of which are very elderly, shall we say, and have real cultural value. And this year in particular, we've seen people climbing them, they're falling down. And I just do worry about the impact, the physical impact. I think, like Helen said, and I touched on it myself, I think there's so much we can do to engage with people to try and influence behaviour, and I actually think the positive message is much more appropriate than the negative message. So welcome visitors, yeah, and you know, in terms of more visitors, I'm not really sure how many more we can handle, where it doesn't feel full-time, like intense and intrusive. So yeah, I don't know really, but I'm very, very pro the visitors on the whole.
That's fantastic. And do you think, has there been any effort for the local people to get involved in directing the development of tourism in the area?
Yeah, and I think, you know, in Malham, it's such a famous village, and I think the locals, lots of local people have business interests here which are related to tourism, and lots don't. Lots of people came here because they wanted to live in a beautiful community, and so there, you know, there's a bit of disparity there. But I think the COVID crisis has definitely engaged a lot of local people as to tourism, and made them think possibly about how different other people's lives are, people who don't live in places like Malham, who don't have gardens perhaps, who don't have outside space, and maybe just a touch more sympathy. And we had a initiative in the village that was borne out completely by local people this year, and they were called Dales Makers. And basically what they did, there was a rota of people who, when it was really, really busy, were willing to go out in a high vis and hand out maps and talk to people and help them find where they needed to go, to try and preempt some of the problems we faced about people arriving, not knowing where to go, not knowing what Malham was, not understanding where they were, what they'd come to see. And the local people really tried to help them, to engage with them, to try and just preempt some of the things we've seen, like people going off the beaten track and ended up in places they shouldn't be. So yeah, I think things like that are perhaps the future, that we all take a little bit of ownership of it, in terms of positivity.
That's great. There's another question from Gordon Darcy. Do you think that Brexit will make a difference as to how well protected the Dales will be in the future?
Possibly, in the sense that being out of Europe from an environment, from a farm subsidy perspective, has opened up a whole new realm of us having a new agriculture bill, this public money for public goods, and the detail of that remains to be seen. But it possibly means we can create our own stewardship system and own sequence of payments for the things we value about nature and the environment. So maybe that is one bonus. Personally, it wasn't something I wanted, but maybe in farming and nature and landscape value, maybe that's something that will be a positive. Helen's probably more qualified to answer.
I was just going to add that it is one little bit of chink of light in all of this, really, is that the way that the system is going to be set up now, in terms of encouraging farmers into doing more environmental activities on their farm, the way the subsidies are going to be redirected away from just simply owning the land to actually doing something on the land that's really positive for society as a whole, as well as sort of addressing the climate emergency and addressing the biodiversity emergency that we've got in this country. So there's a lot pinning on our new agri-environment scheme that's coming online in 2024, and that is down to how the money is going to be redirected away from just purely paying for land ownership to actually paying for activities on the land. So I've got high hopes. I hope they don't get dashed, but I've got high hopes that this will actually be achieved in the long term, and it is quite an exciting time in a way in this sphere of our work.
That's excellent. Brendan, do you want to you want to close the evening? We're coming close to the time.
I think we will. I mean, I think it's been a really brilliant presentation. I'm a great fan of the work that Helen, you've been doing over there on many different levels for many years, and Neil from the Limestone Country Project, but also Leigh and the Dales Dolphin himself, who we're lucky to hear from tonight, as he's been called, amongst other things in the chat. But it's been a really wonderful experience. And just what I love about this talk series is there's so much contrast between the challenges faced in different landscapes. I was laughing at Helen that you were collecting juniper seed, while over in Sweden, Suzanne and her colleagues have been trying to remove juniper, which is a highly invasive species. And I know Louise from Newfoundland is on the call tonight. I'm sure mass tourism is something they haven't quite had to deal with too much yet. But I wanted to thank everybody, but I wanted to maybe go to Stephen Ward, who is a great friend to us here in the Burren and is very familiar with the Dales. So Stephen, I'm not sure you can speak there. Can we enable you to speak or not?
I made him into a panelist, so he should be.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
can you hear me?
yes, we can, yeah. Stephen. So the last word is yours, and happy Christmas to everybody on the call. I'm just going to sign off myself and hand over to you, Stephen.
Well, thank you very much, and hello to all my friends in the Burren. It's absolutely fantastic to be with you all in Tubber Village Hall on such a wintry evening round the fire with a cup of tea. What I find absolutely amazing how this has now been made a worldwide occasion. Fantastic. There are two things I'd just like to say. One is that mention has been made of Brexit. we're all sitting here on tenterhooks. Oh, well, I don't know about all of us, but certainly I am, and a lot more people, wondering how things are going to pan out, because whatever happens, I hope we and you, i.e. the folk of Yorkshire, shall we say, me being a Yorkshireman, and the folk of the Burren, stay close to one another in terms of our objectives for nature conservation in these two fantastic limestone areas. The second thing is that it has often occurred to me that it would be a wonderful thing to twin the limestone areas of the Yorkshire Dales with the limestone areas of the Burren. I will leave that to authority as to how we do it, but with someone as influential as Neil Heseltine, Chairman of the Yorkshire Dales National Park Authority, he's in a key position. And I know that Brendan's in a key position to think about this, so I'll leave that thought with you. Thank you very much.
I think as long as it doesn't, it means we don't all have to go doing that wild swimming thing. That might be an option. Thank you so much, Stephen, and thank you to everybody, including the Burnbio team, for a great year. And we look forward to reconvening with our tea talks in January, when I think we're hearing from our colleagues in Slovenia. Thanks and good night, everybody.